So why don't no while you've got the floor, Justin, why don't you what do you have for us today?
Okay, well, I really, really did enjoy this film. So thank you for the suggestion, Henry. Because
Oh, no
although I
problem.
knew of the film, I it's Cruising by with Al Pacino,
Oh
directed
yes,
directed
yes.
by William Friedkin. But I'd never actually seen it before, apart from I think it was on late night TV once in the late '80s when I was a teenager, and I might have seen a little bit of it on late night TV, but I never watched the entire film. So it's a film that I've heard a lot about, but never actually watched from start to finish. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. The only actor that I knew well was Al Pacino, who plays the lead character, police detective Steve Burns, and it's in New York. I think it's supposed to be set around 1979 because
There are a lot of I don't want
Oh
even to
yeah.
butt in, but there are a lot of actors who went on to do other very notable things that have small roles in that movie that I was surprised at. Like James
yeah,
Remar. I think that's James Remar's first movie before he was in the
Oh
Warriors.
wow.
Um, some other people, but go ahead. Sorry.
well, even Captain Edelstein, who was in charge of Steve Burns at the police department, I recognised the face. So there's
Yeah,
a lot of characters in there that I recognised without actually being big names, character actors.
yeah.
Um, but William Friedkin is obviously a great director because one of my favorite films, The Exorcist, he's the director of that as well. It's a little bit earlier, but 72 or 73. But
Is that your
this
favorite
one's
movie by him?
The Exorcist.
What
Well,
you've seen?
yeah, well, I like horror films, so that's my favorite, probably
Have you
my
seen
favorite horror
Bug?
film.
Bug is by far my favorite movie of his. Nothing even touches it of his others. And I'm not knocking The Exorcist, but Bug is
Yeah,
like an intense psychological experience. I mean, Ashley Judd should have gotten like all the acting awards on earth for that one. But anyway,
yeah,
that was he did a late career kind of comeback because he hooked up with that playwright Tracy Letts, and they did Killer Joe with McConaughey, and then they did
That's
Bug.
I've heard that's great.
It's incredible.
Killer Joe's for good one for
It is.
a crime series.
It is. I think I put it on that list. Yeah, yeah. So go ahead,
he's got
Justin.
a big,
Sorry.
he's got a big series of films on. If you look up William Friedkin, the number of films he's directed. So the two ones
Oh
that I'm
yeah.
familiar with, I like a lot. So he's batting 100% at the moment, for my views anyway.
He's batting
Um,
100 so far.
that's right. So he was the director. It's shot in 1979 in New York, so it was interesting to see the landmarks if you're familiar with New York City like I am. Um, and yeah, so the basically the general plot idea is that it starts off with some body limbs like an arm washed up in the Hudson River, and then they discuss that this must be a murder. It's not a suicide. Clearly, someone's been killed. And then it flashes at the start and throughout the film actually to scenes in leather bars, gay bars throughout New York, with people hooking up, and hence the term cruising. Um, and the first murder occurs with a hookup at one of these bars in Christopher Street or Greenwich Village. And the modus operandi of the killer is to stab someone in the back multiple times. And so the next scene is at the morgue with the autopsy, and the police are discussing that this is a similar stabbing death compared with this college professor from Columbia University who was also murdered in just recently before that. And then you're introduced to Al Pacino's character, Steve, the detective, Steve Burns, and he's asked to go undercover through the New York leather. They make a point that it's not mainstream gay life; it's the leather sort of S&M type subculture of gay life in New York. So yeah, so he immerses himself in that culture. Steve also has a long term girlfriend, and they make a point throughout the film that the more he immerses himself in this gay leather scene culture, he starts to sort of almost question himself. They kind of make a point about that.
Mhm.
So much so that halfway through the film, she asks him, "What's going on? You're not really hanging around me very much anymore." He's not allowed to reveal anything about what he's doing in terms of undercover, so he can't even tell her what his latest assignment is. But he does say to her that it's affected me to the point, that I don't even understand what's happening to me. So is what he says. And so she suggests that they take a break for a while, a hiatus, and he says, "Well, yeah, maybe we do that." Although I think they do obviously reconcile at the end. Um, so there's a halfway through the film. Also, there's a young man who often is a frequenter of these bars, and he's basically fingered by or identified by Al Pacino's character as the possible culprit, which turns out to be incorrect. There's going to be plenty of spoilers in my
A lot of red
in my
herrings.
description.
I wanted to say real quick that people who are into Italian movies should really watch this movie, because a friend of mine once said this is an American Giallo, and it really is. It really is, as every trope of a Giallo, man. But go ahead, sorry.
So
Great
anyway,
outfits. Great outfits. The 70s outfits in it are fantastic.
Oh yeah, it's
Oh,
great. It's
yeah, it's
groovy.
worth watching just for that. Actually, just see that side of life in late 1970s was great. But yeah, so this young guy by the name of Skip Lee, who's very outgoing, who's very well known in this leather scene. He works at a restaurant at Penn Station, as it turns out, and some undercover cops go to the restaurant at Penn Station, and lo and behold, these steak knives, these very obvious steak knives and they think, oh, well, that's kind of what could have been used as the weapon to kill these unfortunates who have been, by now, as 2 people or 3 people have been murdered. And so they haul in this young guy, Skip Lee, as the main suspect, and really put him through the ringer in terms of the sinking ball test and this kind of thing. And they have this.
That's right out of a Giallo where they torment the wrong guy.
It's really bizarre. And even Al Pacino's character, because he's undercover, he gets roughed up as well. He gets hauled in and roughed up as well, as because I don't want to reveal, obviously, that he's actually a cop, which doesn't go down too well with Al's character. But anyway, the really bizarre thing is they keep bringing this huge black guy in with just like a jockstrap on, and slapping the hell out of firstly Al Pacino's character, and then later on this young guy, Skip Lee, and while the other cops are just sitting around talking. But anyway, the next scene, someone comes in and says, well, we've done the fingerprint test and on this coin that they'd found at the first murder, and Skip Lee's fingerprints are not a match. And they said, oh, we can try it. We still think we should question him a bit more. And the police the head of the department says, no, forget it. You've got the wrong guy. You've he'll have, just look elsewhere, basically. And at that point, Steve, Al Pacino's character, says to Captain Edelstein, look, I want out of this. I don't know if I can do this anymore.
I got to interrupt again. That's Paul Sorvino. I forgot that. He is a very famous actor, but character.
Yeah,
actor.
I know the name.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So he says, I can't do this anymore. It's having an effect. I've taken a break from my girlfriend, and I don't like the way this guy had the shit kicked out of him just because he's gay, effectively. Mm-hmm. So that's really the part of the film where they kind of do a little, to a small extent, examine homophobia. The fact that, and Sorvino's character, Captain Edelstein, says, well, you're the one who identified this guy as the main suspect, so don't blame us.
Yikes.
And Steve says, well, no, hang on. I didn't expect you were going to go that hard on the guy. You've destroyed the poor kid. Anyway, and I said, I don't like the idea of of basically putting people into this when, just because they're gay, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So anyway, but at that point, Captain Edelstein says, well, no, I need you. We're up to our arse in this. You've got to continue. I'm relying on you. And he goes, take this list. It's a photo gallery of students of the Columbia University, professor. I want you to go through the list and see if you can recognize anyone from these gay bars. And he just snatches the list and walks off. He's not really happy about continuing. But when he's going through the list, the yearbook of all these students for the Columbia University professor who was murdered, he ticks off a couple, and he's sort of remembering at least 2 of these faces that he thinks he's seen at these leather bars. And it turns out you're sort of thinking, well, is this guy going to be another red herring, false lead? But then you think, oh, there's only 30 minutes to go in the film, so you realise this is probably the guy. And there's quite a good-looking guy called Stewie, who is a student at Columbia University. And so the next part of the film, he works out a lot. And the next part of the film, Al Pacino's Steve is basically stalking this guy. He's watching his student flat. He's following him around the university. He breaks into the student flat and goes through the guy's mail, looks at his wardrobe and closet. And sure enough, there's all leather gear and hat and jacket and so forth. And he finds all these letters to Stewie's father, who lives in St. Louis. envelopes after envelope addressed to his father. And then there's another scene where Stewie goes, and apparently he's a music student at Columbia University, but suffers from schizophrenia. And he's meeting his father, who's in a suit, and he says something like, "I've got to stop doing this. I just want you to talk to me." So there's something about Stewie's relationship with his father which is very dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And the elderly father says, "Well, you've just got to keep doing what I told you to do." And at that point, you think, "Oh, well, Stewie's obviously the killer," and it sounds as though his father is encouraging him to actually kill these people.
He's trying to please his father.
He's trying to please his father, yeah. And then the final part of the film, because Stewie keeps seeing Al Pacino's character basically stalking him or hanging around his apartment, eventually they meet up in Central Park. There's actually a couple of scenes in Central Park, so that's a bit of a landmark feature of the film, actually. So this sort of foggy night in Central Park.
A lot of stories went down in Central Park in the 70s, man.
I can imagine it's a massive park. If you've been there, it's huge. But
yeah, I've been there.
Anyway, yeah. So they're sitting on these park benches smoking, and eventually they're talking about, "You're going to come back to my place, or I'll go to your place." And he says, "Where do you live?" And he says, "Oh, West Village." So Stewie says, "Oh, forget about that." And there's sort of this quiet menace about the conversation. They're sort of, it's almost like a hostile conversation.
Yeah, there's a tension.
Real tension. And Stewie says, "Well, that's too far, Greenwich Village. What about just that tunnel over there?" So
subtle.
So they walk into, there's no one around, because Al Pacino goes, "I don't like to do these things in public." And he goes, "Oh, listen, there's no one around. There's no one around. There's no one around. Don't worry about it."
Why not, man? Get with it.
Yeah. So to cut a long story short, they go into this tunnel, and obviously Stewie's got a knife in the side of his boot, and he acts first and tries to, I don't know if he maybe suspects that Steve Burns is actually a cop. There's something strange about this guy, so he tries to go stab quite early in the piece. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the other murders that you see, there's two other murders that you see with Stewie where he kind of leads the victim on, and there's a bit of
the murders are pretty brutal.
And the murders are brutal, but they don't happen straight away.
Right.
But he tries to stab. Yeah. He tries to stab Al Pacino quite suddenly, but Pacino's character's too quick for him and stabs him in the stomach. And then the next thing, you're in the hospital. So Stewie didn't die, but he's lying in the hospital. And Captain Edelstein says, "Well, Stuart, the man that you tried to hook up with in the park is actually a police officer, and that you tried to attack." And Stewie says, "Oh, he attacked me first. He tried to attack me." And Edelstein says, "Well, you can forget about it because your fingerprints match this coin that was found at the murder scene of Mr. Perez, was one of the first victims."
The pre-DNA era.
Yeah, that's right. It's fingerprinting. Yeah. So at that point, definitely he's the killer. And the reason I say that is important is because what I liked about the film is there's a very bit of a twist at the end. It's quite an ambiguous ending. Mm-hmm. And I'll have to reveal it now that I've said it. But so in the last 10 minutes or just after the scene in the hospital, you see all these police hanging around an apartment building. And what I should have mentioned earlier is that at the start of the film, when he first goes undercover, Steve Burns moves into a flat in a sort of gay district in the meatpacking district, and he befriends this young guy who's a gay playwright.
Yeah, that's
called Ted. So Ted is Steve Burns' neighbor, a very nice guy. Mm-hmm. But it turns out he's got a very jealous boyfriend who's a dancer.
Played by James Remar.
Yeah, Gregory. So in the last sort of half hour of the film, just before the final climactic scenes, so Steve Burns goes to see Ted, but Ted's not there, but the jealous boyfriend is there. And he's very disparaging towards Al Pacino's character and calls him trash and this sort of thing. It's good that Ted's working at night so that he doesn't have to hang around the usual trash that live next door.
You're a little jealous.
So he was a bit of a nutbag. So anyway, the next thing, Al Pacino's character kicks the door down and they have a confrontation, push each other around.
Yeah.
But Gregory grabs like another one of these steak knives and sort of waves it around. So Steve Burns then exits the apartment. So going back to the end of the film, in the last 5 or 10 minutes, it shows all the police showing up at this apartment block, and Captain Edelstein walks in, and there's Ted, the playwright's been stabbed, and he's lying dead on the floor in his apartment. And you're sort of thinking, well, who could have killed him? Because the main killer, Stewie's already been arrested, or stabbed and then arrested. And so they're saying, well, the boyfriend's nowhere to be found, Gregory. We've got trying to find where he is. So he's the main suspect. But then they also go to the final scene, which is at Al Pacino's place with his girlfriend is back. I forget her name.
Yeah.
But he's having a shave and says, "Oh, just wait out there. I'm going to come and tell you everything that I've been doing in terms of my latest assignment." And so she goes and sort of tries on the leather cap and the jacket and this sort of thing, and then it shows the final frame shows Al Pacino looking out the window towards the Hudson River, and you're sort of thinking, I read up a bit on this about the ambiguous ending, and it kind of suggests that who could have been the killer of Ted at the end of the film? Was it the jealous boyfriend, or was it? And I don't think this seems likely at all, quite frankly, or was it Steve Burns who broke in and then killed Ted? But obviously Steve Burns would have had no motive to do that.
Well, I have a theory about that. I think he did have a motive. I'm not saying he was right to do it. I'm not saying this is ironclad. I think Steve killed Ted because Ted and him were getting really emotionally involved. I mean, however you want to look at it, one or both of them was reading it that way, and obviously the boyfriend was reading it that way. And Steve, in my opinion, Steve found like his gay side, and of course, because of conditioning, he was repulsed. So he kills this kid because he embodies that. He doesn't want a man in love with him. He doesn't want to be in love with a man. This is just one of my theories. I've read it elsewhere, but I didn't come up with it. But
if this was made in 2024, Gregory would be Steve.
Right.
That's what the big twist would be, is that what we thought was that, it would be the whole Fight Club thing all over again. That's what they would do in 2024. At least in 1980, they didn't do that.
Right.
Well, in some ways, I think they showed that side of life in 1980 more than they would be willing to do so these days. Because everyone's so
that movie was very controversial. They tried to
they kind of got pilloried for it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was pretty young, but I heard all about how horrible. And my mom, of course, she was phasing from being gay friendly to being homophobic because you guessed it, she got born again. So she was like, I heard about that horrible movie where Al Pacino's a queer, blah, 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 blah. But then a lot of gay people hated it too because they thought it stereotyped the culture. Yeah. But I mean, it was pretty accurate of that part of the culture. It wasn't
that part. Yeah, I think that's the key, is that I think it's like, this is not gay life, but it is a culture within.
Yeah, it's like saying all straight people go to S&M clubs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I also
I do, but I mean, no, I'm kidding.
I read where there were pickets and protests from the gay community at the time the film was being made.
See, that would happen now for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That would, because everyone's so polarized and factionalized in identity politics.
That's why they got to make Gregory the hero. So yeah,
I saw it at 13 at the drive-in.
Oh wow!
They always did double features, and if you didn't like what was showing here, you just kind of walk over to another where there's not a car and just listen on the little thing. And I remember that's how I saw this one and a few others. But at 13, I didn't understand really everything that was going on in that movie. I mean, it was pretty it was a pretty mind-blowing movie in that way. But I had already seen Looking for Mr. Goodbar and other movies like
traumatic.
that, right? I had seen that on HBO or whatever, and so I mean, it was already in seeing those kinds of movies.
Yes.
but yeah, the queer culture of the time, I can definitely say that was a little shocking for my brain.
We grew up in a very special time, Keith. I gotta say that. Whether we had got it or repulsed or dug it, I mean, we had access to so much crazy stuff. It was great. My mom had every pornographic novel, and then she got born again, threw them all away. I mean, why'd you throw them all away? I'd already read all.
They were my friends.
Yeah,
all my reading material.
I was like, I'm not gonna read that trashy Jacqueline Suzanne anymore. I found Jesus. Like, I don't know. Jackie's pretty hot. Whatever. She threw away The Exorcist too.
Oh, no.
By today's standards, maybe the gay bar scenes wouldn't be shocking. They would have been shocking back in 1980, mind you. But by today's standards, I think the most shocking scenes are the murder scenes, because you see two murder scenes earlier in the film, where there's where someone actually dies. Those are probably the most brutal and shocking scenes in the film. But
we
I
notice
think
he's killing these gay people by stabbing them, not far above their buttocks. It's like also kind of like twisted, because he's so self-loathing. This guy, he's like totally messed
he's
up.
Obviously self-loathing, and because of his father and his relationship with his father, no doubt.
Yeah,
but it was certainly, it must be. You'd have to say that was a groundbreaking film for 1980. Anyway.
Oh, absolutely,
real,
and it's got a huge following now. I got the Arrow Blu-ray like the week out. And I had only seen it once, too. And I was like,
and it has this line in it, hips or lips, like out of nowhere, hips or lips, and it's like,
that's memorable.
Yeah, that's right at the end in the Central Park scene, of course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I take it most of us here have seen the film.
Oh yeah. No, the one thing, man, I love Friedkin more and more the older I get, and one thing about this film that absolutely floored me when we got that Blu-ray was knowing that he went through there and just about they kind of make the identity of the killer very ambiguous. And throughout the whole thing, I guess, every time you see a scene where a murder is happening, it's usually the guy who was killed in the previous scene playing the guy who's killing the one person, the victim. And it's the killer is being played by different actors throughout the whole runtime.
Yeah.
That's another very Giallo-ish thing to do.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Like in Dario Argento's movies, he's always the killer. He always plays the killer, even though he isn't.
Oh, wow.
Black gloves. I put on the black gloves. I kill him in my movies. I'm like, oh my God, dude. He's a mess. But a brilliant mess.
Now there was a low budget slasher movie that I was part of in the early aughts, and the director constantly had a different person playing the killer in all the scenes.
Is it obvious, or is it just? I mean, is it for effect?
It's obvious to me because I knew all the people acting, but I mean,
did you ever go back and watch it?
Now and again.
Okay, is it obvious to you now that they're all different people?
Well, yeah, it was obvious to me then. It's obvious to me,
right?
Now.
Well, you were there then. I mean, as a viewer coming cold, would you be like, "What the hell? Why is he?"
Well, that'd be impossible for me to say because I'm never coming in cold on that.
What was the name of the movie? I'd like to see this.
Yeah,
it's called Die VDA Die, and it's about it's basically you can find it in multiple parts on YouTube. The whole joke is basically we were all kind of a group of producers at the public access station, and we were all the people whose stuff played at late at night. We were all the viewer discretion advised crowd, or VDA, and we were always getting in trouble with we're always getting in trouble with the puritanical crowd who wanted to censor everything. And so we did a movie about us and where we all played ourselves and we all get murdered, and it's fun. Sorry.
Hi, you've been watching Deep Images. I'm Henry Covert, your host. This is Bergie Williams and C.F. Roberts, two of our most amazing panelists. And we've been talking about an incredible series here. We do these series sessions every so often. We break them into individual episodes. So we wanted to kind of give you a segue and let you know what you've just watched and what you can look forward to. So just want to remind you, thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe, and support the channel any way you can. You guys have anything to say?
Yeah, like, subscribe, come back, see us. We don't bite. Type.
Do you like that? We like that. Let me tell you something. Leave some comments.
Hell yeah.
Leave something in chat. If you like us, talk to us. If you don't like us, talk to us. We want to hear from you.
All right. Y'all have a good evening. Thanks for watching.